Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am delighted on this episode to be talking with someone whose work I feel like I can spot. I feel like you have a unique style. I feel like there's a certain sensibility that you bring to the comics page that I recognize pretty immediately. And that person in this case is Marco Finnegan. Marco, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of moving back and forth between talking about you in first person, second person, and third person there, but I think it comes together. The first book of yours that I remember reading and sort of discovering was Lizard in a Zoot Suit, which is very fun text and shows off your storytelling, both visual and verbal. And then I know you've also worked in the world of 007 as well, doing some James Bond stuff. And now we have Morningstar from Mad Cave. So lots of wonderful creating that you've done out there.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's fun because it's been, I think I've worked like kids' books, then I did horror, and then I did crime and 007, and then whatever genre we're putting Morningstar in, which is I
Yeah,
guess like sci-fi horror. But yeah, it's fun. It's been, not a bad way to spend an afternoon drawing,
yeah. Or reading
or
when
reading.
it's all said and done and ready. Yeah. I love how horror and science fiction kind of blend a little bit too. That kind of creates a really nice, entertaining mixture as well.
Yeah, Morningstar is wild because it's a little bit of everything. Like it's got like family drama stuff, and it's got some horror thing like horror elements, and then some sci-fi stuff that's going to come out as the series goes on. So like this issue and then next issue really get into the sci-fi stuff.
Nice, nice. Any words that you'd like to share about sort of the creative impetus, sort of the mixture of what Morningstar is like?
Yeah, it's kind of what Tim and DB and I always kind of say, like it's like if Stephen King wrote like a Amblin movie, it's
Ah,
kind of set in that, like it's in that those kind of two worlds where it's very creepy and unsettling, but it's still a family drama. Like at the heart of it, it's a family drama of these people dealing with grief. Tim and I started it 10 years ago almost, and then we were going to do it with a company, and then it kind of fell through, and then so we did the whole first issue, and we were just kind of sitting on it, but it was always there, always came up, and then we brought DB on, and he kind of was the missing piece, and then Mad Cave picked it up, and so it's been with us for a long time. Like my son, who's now going to be 19, was the model for the boy in the story, and now my son, who is going to be 15, is now was the model because the other one outgrew it, so we had to kind of go back and scrap it.
yeah. Well, I love that you're including family as part of the inspiration. And they don't pay me to say this. They don't pay me at all, actually. But shout out to Mad Cave because they've been really lining up some impressive books this year. And I was very excited to see your name as part of the talent that they're pulling in as well.
Yeah, no, they've been first of all, they're the nicest people. I mean, they're just you can just tell they love comics, and they're so supportive, and they're so excited about the work. And our editor over there, James, is just ridiculous. I mean, just the what you want in an editor, where he's got great ideas and is just the biggest cheerleader for us and celebrates everything. But they've been doing some great stuff. I mean, they're just kind of on fire right now. Like I say in the last year, they're probably the publisher that I'm, even if I wasn't doing books with, like them and a few others are just doing some really exciting stuff. Like it's nice because it's not all superhero stuff too. Like they have such a nice range of stuff
Yeah.
that you don't know what you're getting from them. Yeah, that new crime book, I don't know, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you,
We'll put
but
it in
they're
the
rad.
show notes.
I like. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, well, curious about some of the inspirations that you bring to this book, to other work that you've done. Any particular authors or stories, artists that have sort of been inspirations to you?
I'm a big like old school comic guy, so I really like Milton Caniff. I like So he was huge on this one. I looked at a lot. Leonard Starr. He wrote and drew the Mary Perkins on stage comic strip, and it's kind of set at the same time as this. Um, Jack Cole. So all those like 1950s and earlier are kind of my lane. So it was really nice to kind of be able to lean into that a little bit more.
Hmm.
And try to, sometimes that influence is always there, but you kind of have to modernize, clothes and style. But this way I could really lean into it and do like the bouffant hair and, the cool Sandra D, the daughter, like the model was like Sandra D from the old Gidget movies. So I could really lean into that kind of stuff. So that was kind of fun. But in terms of like when I write, it's more crime fiction stuff. So um, James Lee Burke and Elmer Leonard and those
Hmm.
Handler and Hammett, those guys for sure. That's kind of where I'm at, in terms of writing is very crime stuff, and then drawing is it's a very small little overlapping circle of noir and 50s and 40s stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Any particular rituals or things that you do to sort of get in that visual world, or anything about the approach to Morningstar that you want to mention?
I think with every book, it's just kind of I mean, it's nice that you said that at the beginning that you could kind of pick out the work that I did because I never feel like I have like a set style. Like I don't, I think there's like a set sensibility. But like with Bond, like I really leaned into like 1960s and 70s again, but more of like the cleaner illustration stuff. And then with this, I went back and just read comics from like the 50s and 60s and, a lot of John Buscema stuff from then and Romita Jr. So it's just kind of figuring out what the story wants and then inventing the wheel each time. So that's what I feel like. I think there's certain things that are now coming through that you can kind of tell. But like with The Keeper for Abrams, that was a modern horror book. So I had,
Hmm.
I went back and looked at a lot of like Jay Lee, even Frank Miller stuff. So it's really just whatever the story is at the time. Probably not the smartest way to market a brand by switching up so much, but uh, I still, I just think it's whatever the story needs. And so with this one, Tim and DB wrote really nice emotional beats. So those romance comics from like the 50s and 60s, and, really, I looked at a lot of that stuff, a lot of Toth. So the melodrama, it just reads so well. So
Yeah.
I stole from them a lot too.
Well, I remember picking up the first issue of what you worked on with 007, and I don't think I'd looked at sort of the creator page first. I looked at the art first and some of the storytelling, and it was a really unique take because I've read a lot of those books. But there was something about it. There was something about the style, and I was like, "This is a little different." And then I looked back, and of course, you were listed as the artist, so I kind of went, "Ah, there it is, there it is." So there's definitely that through line, at least that I see, and of course, readers out there and listeners can compare the
That's
works and see what they think as well.
I think yeah, Bond was fun because they did the tryout and they actually like were they the Fleming people like, wrote an email and they're like, oh, we like that he's leaning into that comic strip thing. I was like, okay, so now once I got the green light, I was like, oh yeah, we're going full bore into that.
Yeah, yeah. If the
But
Fleming
thank you.
estate and the Broccolis like it, you're solid, you're gold.
Yeah, that was like the first big like IP that I ever did. So it was kind of fun, like just being able to be a teeny tiny bit of that huge tapestry.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so for listeners out there that are not as familiar with your work, I told you that Lizard in a Zoot Suit was the first place that I started. Anything that you would want to share with those that are sort of new as a starting point, or any sort of tagline or inspiration that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I think I'm a genre guy. Like I just like different genres. So like with Lizard and the Zoot Suit, it was I liked that period. I kind of done some research on that, like in terms of like my background and my heritage, and just wanted to when I'm writing, I like to try to make the characters people that don't get a lot of attention, typically, and they're kind of erased from history. So like, with that one, it was putting back, these Mexican American Chicano kids that existed around the time of my parents, and put them into genre stories. Because a lot of times when you see people of color, especially in period pieces, it's usually like trauma. It's like trauma related or historical or something. So just trying to kind of, you know, why can't adventures happen to all kids and and monsters and aliens and stuff? Because I remember when I was watching like ET and all those movies as a kid, it was always kids that were like in the suburbs, and I was like a urban kid in an apartment. I was like, man, we're never gonna get aliens that land here. Like they only land in the suburbs. So
Right.
just trying to kind of tell tell stories for people that don't usually get the spotlight. So I'm working on this thing right now that will be out hopefully this year, if towards the end of the year, and it's kind of the same thing where it's replacing people back into the fictional narrative, as opposed we know like certain people existed during history, but they're usually like footnotes and they're kind of a pop culture. So kind of just uh, putting them back into that kind of world, putting us back into that world. It's like there's a Walter Mosley quote that I have on my desk because I would picture it, but it says, uh, he's driven by the belief that if people don't exist in literature, they don't exist at all to the general public. So it's just kind of going back and, you know, it's putting people back into the story of pop culture, as much as I can. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it's just fun comics with monsters and stuff, but it's nice to have add a little diversity to the cast because everybody was there. Like
Mhm.
I'm sure where you grew up, you're walking around going, "Oh, this is a place for aliens to land, or or a monster to live," and that's all I'm doing with it is just kind of going, "Well, yeah, I was a kid and I wanted monsters to show up where I live too." So a long-winded answer, but yeah, that's it.
No, that's a great answer. Great answer. And I'm glad you also mentioned Walter Mosley. I was going to mention the Elmore Leonard rules for writing. You were talking about Elmore Leonard a
Oh
little while
yeah,
ago, so love that punchy style that he inspires as well.
yeah, it's cool because my almost 19-year-old has gotten so into Elmore Leonard, so now uh, I get to revisit them all through him. He got into the Justified show, and through that got into the novels, and I was like, oh, now when your kids get older, you're like, oh wait, now it's time to open up that section of the bookshelf and and hand over those books. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, he's amazing. One of my, I think he's the first author that I was like, oh, like he's an author like that, like like this is what he does. I think I was like 19 or 20, and you just oh, he wrote this, and he was so great because you get like a body of work to follow, right?
Mhm.
From the 50s, and then you become like that comic book completist in us where you're like, I now have to get everything he's ever written, even if it was no good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that was kind of, yeah, you know what I'm talking. Yeah, I'm sure you have the same thing. It's like, oh, this guy drew this. Let me go find everything his name has ever been on. And that was the first author I did. He did it for comics, obviously, but that was the first like author where I was like, I gotta have everything he's ever written. And then you realize that some stuff you're like, oh, not everything they've ever done is great.
Which is nice to see too. It's
Yeah.
nice to see the legends like finding their footing as well.
Cool to see, it's with him, he's great because there's so much stuff. Like, he's touched and like movies, and I think I still discover certain things from like, well, that was a really, like like Ombre. I think I just realized the other day was one of his, and just I just love seeing like how people grow and like uh and the through lines to people's work,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
someone who has done so much, and Mosley's another one where he that guy, talk about genres, that guy jumps genres so easily, and it's just great at all of them. He can just knock it out of the park, whatever he does. So I'll talk about Mosley and Leonard all day, man. So gotta stop.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm just relating. I was like that with Vonnegut and Ray Bradbury. I was like that with Michael Crichton, sort of like digging into the work that you find and then going, I'm going to read everything by this person. Um, and some of my favorite people actually cross genres. A lot of what I appreciate about writers and artists is that ability to sort of jump from one type of story to another and to do it as though kind of like they're playing with it in a way.
Yeah, and then it's cool when you're young, and I don't know if this was like that for you, but I remember being young and going, "Wait, he can write a western? Like you can just like you can just decide like now you're gonna write a western." And like when Spielberg did, or not Spielberg, when Stephen King did, his big fantasy thing, I was like, you can just you can just all of a sudden be like, I'm the horror guy, and now I'm gonna write this fantasy epic. Like that's allowed, and when you're because you're when especially you're probably about my age, growing up in the 80s and 90s, where you don't have the frame of reference. Like you can't type Stephen King into a computer and see everything he's ever done. So you're just whatever your initial connections, you kind of just stay with that,
Hmm.
and then you kind of go, oh, like like I remember with James Lee Burke when I found out he was just a lot of his stories were just Bible myths, like retold, like in really violent crime things. I was like, you can that's allowed, like you can do that, so stuff like that always blows my mind where you kind of get this thing in your head, of how people are supposed to work, and then it just gets torpedoed the more you dig into people's work. Like Jack Kirby's romance comics are my favorite. I just think it's I remember he did romance comics, like the Fantastic Four guy was doing romance comics, like it's I just think it's awesome when you can see people stretching those other muscles that you didn't know that they had. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where all of my genre jumping comes from. Because I, I'll do a romance comic, and that's kind of the permission that I give myself. I was like, Jack Kirby did a romance comic. I can do romance comic.
Absolutely. So I'm hearing that a romance comic is on the way at some point.
Oh yeah, it's good. I think I've played with it. I'm doing another a, a really supernatural noir is what I'm writing now,
Hmm.
and then I have I want I'm trying to do like a couple for publishers, and then do one for me, and then a couple for publishers and do one for me. And I think I'm going to do another horror I want to do after that, and I have a western. But yeah, romance. I think the romance I need to get enough like credibility first, and like I need to actually do well before I'm like, okay, before I go to my agent and be like, okay, so we've had some success with noir and
Hmm.
we've had
Hmm.
some success with horror. Torpedo that success with uh, a romance.
Well, curious about places where people can go to learn more about your work, places where people can go to check out Morningstar, any spaces where you'd like to connect.
Yeah, obviously Twitter or whatever it is now, I'm on there probably too much. And it's at Marco949. And then Instagram is Marco Finnegan. And whatever new thing will pop up next week, I'll probably be on that too. But yeah, I'm kind of whatever, wherever people are talking about comics and books, like I'll be there. So I don't drive my
Cool.
family crazy talking about comics and books.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, looking forward to the work that's on the way, even a romance comic at some point. I will go there. If your name is on it, I'm curious.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you and glad to talk anytime. I appreciate the time.